Thank you all for joining today's webinar. We've titled today's webinar, How to Turn Your Utility Network Migration into a Strategic Advantage. My name is Josh Swinson. I'm with GeoNexus, and I'll introduce Zach here in just a second. But really, we're taking the time today to discuss the move to utility networks. So the move to the UN, to Esri's UN, has been a popular project for probably the last 3 years. The focus today is a little bit different. We've talked about this in the past a little bit, but we've mostly focused on larger utilities, or we've focused generally on just the idea of moving to the utility network project. And today we're going to do some of the same, but we're hoping to focus for more your municipal utility today, as that's who Langen works with quite a bit, and talk about some of the projects, some practical learnings over projects that have been done from a UN migration or move to the UN project perspective through projects that Zach and team have worked on. And then we'll talk a little bit about the role of integration in that as well. And so happy to be here today. Happy to have you all here today. Thanks again for joining. From an agenda perspective, I've covered some of this, but we're going to talk about setting the stage for your UN move, right? And our hope here is really to calm some anxieties. We know through the different conversations that we have day in and day out between my team and Zach's team separately, that this idea of having to make this move to the UN and all that's involved can be anxiety forming, right? And so our hope through this is to help you, again, gain some practical lessons towards making a smooth transition over to the utility network, but also to understand that you're not alone, that there are plenty of other organizations that are going through this. The challenges are real. They're across organizations, and there are teams like ours that are here to help and really calm those fears. We want to talk about how you get started on this. We want to talk again about the integration challenge that exists, how you keep the lights on from an integration perspective as you're moving through this. And then we're going to talk with the majority of our time about how you can really turn this project into an opportunity, and how you can take this from a data project and really turn it into a true modernization project for your organization. And then our hope is at the end to leave you with a couple of things that you can do right now to get started. And then, of course, Q&A. Always Q&A, and then we'll have next steps as well. To the point of Q&A, one housekeeping piece of things. If you look to the top left of your webinar interface, you should see a tab up there. I think it's the second or third from the left that says Q&A. If you were to click on that tab, you'll see a dialog box at the bottom left that allows you to share questions with us. And so you can type your message in there, and it'll send to the group here. With that said, we want your questions, right? So please feel free to enter them in. We love having the questions. I'm going to do my best if a question comes in and it's within the context of whatever Zach is talking about or whatever I'm talking about at the time. I'm going to do my best to share it at that time so that we can then kind of mix it into the conversation where it fits, if you will. Sometimes that can be difficult as you're talking and fielding questions, but again, I'll do my best. If we don't get to them, we do have time put aside at the end where we'll answer those questions that you provide to us. So please provide those questions. We appreciate them for sure. All right, other piece of housekeeping, then we'll get on to introductions and get on to the presentation. The Esri UC is coming up, as many of you know, in the middle of July in San Diego. We have some QR codes. I'll say this up front so that you can get scanning on these. A couple of QR codes that can help you book meetings with our individual teams at the Esri UC. GeoNexus will be at booth 514. I will be there with the team of people from GeoNexus. And so please feel free to pull up your camera, scan this, take a picture of this. We're going to be, again, at the booth for the 3 days of the expo. We'll be showing off some of the innovations around the product. We'll be talking about some of what's coming next with the GeoNexus integration platform. We're going to talk more about some of the things that are going on in our organization. We're actually doing a presentation there with Tacoma Power. And so you can get some information. I believe through this QR code, you might be able to end up on our landing page as well and get some information about that presentation. And so we'd love to see you there. And then Langen will be at booth 724, and a team will be there. I don't think Zach's joining, but he said some of his team will be there, and happy to take your meeting there and talk about what they do, which you're going to learn a little bit more about here in just a second. All right. So with that, I'm going to introduce Zach. And let Zach say hello, and then I'll talk a little bit about GeoNexus, and then Zach will talk a little bit about Langen, and we'll go from there. So, Zach, thanks for taking the time to do this. Really excited for your piece of things and telling us about the projects you've worked on, and some of the customer stories you have in here I think are fantastic. And so feel free to say hello.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Lawler. I am a GIS manager here at Langen. My role at Langen is specifically around the utility network practice. So that can range anywhere from utility network deployments, advisement, sustainment, anything in between. That's kind of my role. And like Josh mentioned, Langen has a booth at this year's Esri's UC. I will not be there, but we have a comprehensive team that will be there at the booth, ready to answer any and all questions you may have.
Awesome. Well, you will be missed, Zach, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth mentioning as I move into the presentation that Zach is a huge soccer fan, and it's been nice enough to take time out of his World Cup viewing while working to do this presentation. So thank you again for being here, Zach. Really appreciate it. All right. One of the things I always like to do, that we always like to do as we get into these webinars and have some discussion around how our companies work together as partners, the projects that we work on, and, most importantly, some practical learnings for you all as the audience, is to introduce our two organizations. I don't want to assume that those that are joining have any knowledge of GeoNexus and what we do. And Zach doesn't want to assume the same about Langen. And so I always think it's helpful to set the table and talk a little bit about what each of our organizations do, the products that we offer, the services that we offer. So as we get into the practical nature of discussions around these projects, you have some kind of baseline understanding of where we fit in them and what we do. So with that, I'm going to talk briefly about GeoNexus and what we do as a team and as a product, and then I'll turn it over to Zach from there. So for those of you that are not familiar, GeoNexus is a software company. We've been around for just at 17 years now. Our company was founded really with the focus on providing a true path to geospatial integration. So our real focus, our real expertise has been built on that 17 years of experience of geospatial integration. It started before our time as a software company. Our founder was focused with both Esri and with some system integrators on building these custom integrations, if you will, that were in place at this point for geospatial integration, and really knew that there was a better way to do it. Had a vision for productizing geospatial integrations, and 17 years ago started on that journey. And we're at a great place 17 years in, and have been providing GeoWorks Sync was the name of our first product, and now the GeoNexus integration platform, which I'll talk about here shortly, is the name of our current product. So you might know the name of those products if you're just getting started with GeoNexus, as we've been out in the environment for quite a while. We serve over 50 plus utilities or customers across the globe. North America, Middle East, Australia has been a great market for us. And again, the majority of our customers are utility customers: water, wastewater, gas, and electric. We do have some customers in transportation, pipeline, universities, but the majority are in true utilities. And then what we do as a product, as I said, our current version of the product is called the GeoNexus Integration Platform. I will refer to it as GIP from time to time throughout today's discussion. And it does these three things at a 30,000-foot view, right? These are our core competencies. Our goal is to simplify the setup, the configuration, and the management of your integrations, right? So give simple tools to connect within our productized connectors, and then mapping, out-of-the-box mapping tools that really make it easy to pull down data sources, grab fields, and configure those fields to communicate with fields on the other side. As an example, if you have GIS to an EAM integration you're setting up, you can tell the Esri side when something's created on this field, I want something to be created on, say, the Maximo field on the other side, right? Same for updating, same for retirements and deletes. And so it's really simplifying that setup. And as importantly, if not more so, the management, once you get it set up, anytime you're adding something, anytime there's an update to a system and you need to reconfigure data schemas, which we're going to talk about a bit today, it makes it simple to do that so you can really streamline your project and reduce the cost around that kind of setup and maintenance. The next thing the platform does is it automates the synchronization of data, right? So it allows you to schedule, say on a nightly run, those configurations that you set up in step one, and say, I want all this data to run on a nightly basis is kind of the standard way of doing it. Although as we've moved into more of our near real-time functionality, it gives our customers the ability to segment data. Say take 5% of data and say, I want this data to run in that near real-time mode. I want it to run every 5 minutes. And then for the rest of my data, I'm fine with running it on a nightly basis. We do have some customers that even run it on a monthly basis because that fits for their workflow and their needs. And so you really have some flexibility, which is a big part of the platform, to schedule and to automate the synchronization of data as you need. And then lastly, the platform provides active reporting. I usually say lastly and definitely not least, because once customers get set up and running and they run this report for the first time, it's really kind of the aha moment. It's the first time they really see what their data look like or looks like, and understand, in some cases, just how bad the data alignment really was. And so an aha moment indeed. But really what this reporting is a nightly readout that shows you all of those configurations that you set up. It shows you all the data that's run. It really allows you to view the integration, the synchronization, and understand that it's working as intended. And then a second level that it provides is issue and error notification. Okay, so as you're in the midst of day-to-day operations, it provides you with those error issue notifications to tell you, hey, something went wrong, and then gives you a granular level of detail to help you understand what it was that went wrong there so that you can jump in and fix it, right? So that you're not constantly kind of combing through the haystack for the needle, if you will, but instead you're getting proactive reports and you're getting some level of detail so you can jump in and fix whatever's going wrong. All right, and then lastly, we do all that through this library of connectors. All of these logos that you see here, we have productized connectors for. Esri, IBM, SAP, we'll talk a lot about our Esri connector today. Hitachi, Oracle, so on and so forth, as you see there. With Octave, that's formerly Hexagon, if you're not familiar with their change, so they've changed names again. And so we provide productized connectors that understand the business logic of each of these different systems, as well as a REST API connector that allows us to get to other proprietary systems that you might have or other commercial systems not listed here. And the real goal here is for our team to be keeping up with the advancements of these different products so that when you're ready to upgrade to the latest version of, say, IBM Maximo and MAS 9, or you're moving to S/4HANA, that the GeoNexus integration platform is keeping up with that innovation so that you don't have to manage your integration separately as a product on its own. We're taking care of that for you. So a key part of what we provide. All right, and with that, I'll let Zach talk a little bit about Langen and what they provide.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. That's awesome to hear. So Langen is a multidisciplinary engineering and environmental consulting firm that supports a wide range of land development and infrastructure projects. We work with clients across the full project lifecycle, from early planning and due diligence through design, permitting, and construction support. What sets Langen apart is our integrated approach. We bring together expertise across civil engineering, environmental services, geospatial solutions, and more, allowing us to deliver coordinated, efficient solutions for complex projects. Our clients include developers, corporations, public agencies, and institutions, and we support projects ranging from local sites to large-scale programs around the world. Today, Langen has grown to over 2,000 employees across more than 50 offices, with experience delivering projects in over 100 countries. Throughout that growth, our focus has remained the same: technical excellence, practical experience, and strong client responsiveness. We aim to be a long-term partner, helping our clients navigate challenges and deliver successful, sustainable projects. And with that foundation in place, I'll transition into how our digital solutions team supports these efforts. So Langen's digital solutions capabilities are closely aligned with our engineering and environmental services, with a focus on helping clients better manage their data and get more value out of it. While we support a range of services like data analytics, application development, data visualization, and digital twins, a major focus of our work, and what we're really here to talk about today, is Esri's utility network. Our GIS and data management team specializes in designing and implementing utility network solutions for water, sewer, stormwater, and electric systems. We help organizations modernize their GIS by moving from legacy systems into a more robust, scalable network model that supports advanced capabilities like network tracing, analytics, and real-time decision-making. That work spans the full life cycle, from system architecture and migration planning, through data conversion and validation, all the way to long-term system support and optimization after go live. Ultimately, the goal is not just to implement the utility network, but to help clients get real operational value from it, improving data quality, streamlining workflows, and enabling better, faster decisions across their organization. With that, I'll pass it back to Josh to kick things off with our first poll question.
All right, thanks, Zach. Yeah, so back to where I pointed you to the QA. If we can launch that poll question, you should be receiving a poll question that is popping up in the middle of your screen. And the first question that we have for you today is, what is your biggest concern in moving to the UN? So hopefully you all can see that, and we can jump in and provide some answers there. There we go. I can tell that it has been launched and the folks are answering that. So yeah, so again, what is your biggest concern in moving to the UN? We're going to talk about some of the concerns that we hear each and every day in this first industry challenge section. And as you continue to answer those, getting quite a few answers, quite a few votes right now for data quality and cleanup. Seems to be a big challenge with the group that's joining today. Understanding the data schema design and working through that is definitely one that's in there. The good one that I see, the good news that I see in here is that executive sponsorship and funding is not a big concern. And that, I think that aligns with a lot of what I see. And I think I can speak for Zach a little bit. What we see is I think teams out there really understand the importance of this project, and executive sponsorship for moving to the UN doesn't seem to be, a hard piece of the puzzle to fit in. So data quality and cleanup efforts definitely are a winner here. So with that, I am going to do my best to advance the slides here. Thanks for taking the time to fill that out. We'll have another fun poll question later on. I'm going to go back to Zach and let him talk a little bit about the challenge as he sees it through his projects, and then I'll talk about the integration challenge a little bit. So Zach, back to you.
Thanks, Josh. And going back to that poll question really quick, the number one concern seemed to be data quality and data cleanup. The utility network, it's one of those things where I always say it's only as good as the data you put into it. So getting data cleaned up is very important, mainly to just enhance the quality of your finished network. So moving on, before we get into any technical detail, I want to start by naming the reality. For a lot of local municipal utilities, the directive to migrate to Esri's utility network can feel overwhelming. And it's not because teams aren't capable, it's because you're usually doing this with lean staffing, tight budgets, and the expectation that operations cannot pause while you figure it out. When people hear migration, the anxiety tends to cluster around three common fears. The first fear is, we're going to have to rebuild everything from scratch. The second one is our field crews are going to lose access during the transition. And the third and final is all of our integrations are going to break at once. If any of those are on your mind today, you're in the right place, because the goal of this webinar is to replace that anxiety with a clear plan, not hand-wavy reassurance, an actual roadmap for what changes, what doesn't, and how to move forward without disrupting the day-to-day. So with that as a backdrop, let's talk about why this is happening right now and why both the business side and the technology side are pushing utilities in the same direction. You'll often see these framed as business drivers and technology drivers, but what we're really seeing with clients is that this becomes much more tangible when you connect it to real-world use cases. One example is Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority, or GNHWPCA, where they're leveraging utility network tracing to solve a very specific operational problem, identifying grease trap sources upstream from inspected manholes. Instead of just logging an issue in the field, they can trace the network upstream, pinpoint likely contributors, and take more targeted action. That's just not a GIS improvement, it's a direct operational and regulatory benefit. Another example is a private entertainment campus we worked with that is going through ongoing development and needed to better understand sewer capacity before new build-outs were approved. By integrating the utility network with their sewer modeling software, they're now able to evaluate downstream capacity based on real network conditions and proposed changes, which allows them to make better development decisions with significantly less risk. When you step back, this is really where those drivers become real. On the business side, it's about better decisions, better coordination across systems, and getting real value out of GIS investments. And on the technology side, yes, there are forcing factors like ArcMap retirement and the shift to utility network, but what really matters is what it unlocks: better tracing, better integration, and better visibility across the organization. So the key takeaway is that this isn't just a nice-to-have modernization project anymore. It's an opportunity to turn GIS into something that actively supports operations and decision-making across the utility. And that really tees up the next question we hear all the time. What actually changes? Let's break that down clearly. We'll start by dispelling one of the biggest myths, the idea that migrating to utility network means you're starting over. You're not. You're upgrading the foundation. Here's what does change. The network topology model changes because UN is built around a modern, rules-driven network model. The geometric network framework is replaced, and ArcMap-based workflows are going away as part of the ArcMap retirement reality. And depending on how your maps were built, some legacy symbology and labels may need attention as you modernize. But here's what carries over, and this is the part people need you to hear. Your underlying data is still your asset data. The institutional knowledge your field crews have built doesn't disappear. Your integration logic can carry over too, with the right bridge, and the years of effort you've invested in data collection doesn't get thrown away. So the bottom line is exactly what you see here. You're not rebuilding from zero, you're upgrading the foundation. And once you frame it that way, the project stops feeling like a cliff and starts feeling like a controlled transition you can plan and manage. Next, we'll shift into the area that tends to introduce the most risk during a transition: integrations. Most utilities are operating across multiple systems, and getting those to work together is critical. I'll hand it back over to Josh to walk through some of the real integration challenges we're seeing.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. I feel like you teed me up with the doom and gloom section here, with the biggest risk line, for sure. But yeah, I mean, we want to talk about the integration challenge, and what I'm going to talk about a bit is why the challenge exists, why the challenge feels bigger today than it probably has in the past, and really want to focus for a second on what that causes organizations, like what this challenge is actually leading to from an organizational perspective. And then hopefully I'll be done with the doom and gloom portion of the slides, and I can start to reintroduce some sunshine into your day and focus a little bit on how we can turn this, this challenge that's there into an opportunity, and some of the things that we're seeing from that perspective with the organizations that we work with. So let's talk a little bit about the challenge and why it exists. So I love this visual. I love this slide. I use this quite a bit in day-to-day discussions to illustrate exactly what we're talking about, because as we said at the top, you're not alone in the challenge around integration. Zach's right in everything that he said, that the integration portion of what we're talking about can be daunting. And the why is probably something that's kind of obvious, right? When I think about this and when I look at this visual, I started with GeoNexus. I'm past 5.5 years now, working towards my 6th. And when I started, the conversation was really focused on just point-to-point integrations, right? It was focused on probably these first 2 circles that you can see here in just connecting GIS to asset management, and that was the large majority of the conversations that we had, right? And when you think about the number of systems that have grown, when you think about the reality that GIS has gained a larger seat at the table, that the desire to have, whether it's GIS data pushed out to other systems, to other teams, or to have other teams and their data brought into Esri, and to have it viewed, on a map, and really, as we talk about it, connecting GIS to the rest of the enterprise, as that desire has gained in popularity. So too is the challenge with integrations, right? And this is where the integration challenge has become bigger and bigger, right? The number of systems over the last several years has grown exponentially. And with that, the volume of data just continues to increase at a massive rate. When I think about AI, right? When I think about how prevalent AI is becoming in our lives, and just in the way that businesses work, what we're seeing through AI is rapid expansion of software products, right? So more frequent upgrades, more frequent features pumped into software. Therefore, the need to kind of manage your integrations in a different way, because you're getting newer versions constantly and newer major versions constantly. And I think that'll grow over time. And so all of this is really what's making that integration challenge feel bigger than maybe it did in the past, right? And so, so this is kind of the challenge that's out there. And the additional challenge is that a lot of the integrations that have been in place, as you start to move into the ideas of the UN project, a lot of the integrations that have been in place are custom developed, point-to-point integrations that are a collection of scripts that are super brittle. And one of the things that I hear often with the customers that we talk to, I heard it the other day from one, and they said, we've now realized that these custom scripts that we have in place, as we grow, as the systems grow, as we want to do more to connect, it's just not scalable. We can't manage these going on the way that we have. And that's something that we hear quite frequently, right? Because really, and this gets into kind of what's happening, is they're dealing with disconnected systems, right? These brittle point-to-point integrations are breaking, and they're faced with problems like you see here, right? So you'll have someone that that's looking for an asset. They'll go into GIS, and they'll say, let's see what information's in GIS. And it says that asset was installed in 2019, right? Maybe they have a work management system they go into, and it says, that asset was installed in 2021. So different information. Asset management has a different view of things and says it was installed in 2020, right? So 3 different systems, 3 different answers, and then you get to the 4th, and there's no record at all, right? And the point that I'm trying to illustrate here is really the outcome of these disconnected systems. Not only are they frustrating during the day-to-day operations, but ultimately they create this problem that nobody trusts any of the systems. So everybody across your organization has their individual view, and they don't trust any of the other systems that are in there. And so this is where I try to switch things from the doom and gloom, because you're probably sitting with your head in your hands saying, yep, I know this all too well. I know it better than you, Josh. I deal with this on a day-to-day basis. This is what we're trying to flip around with the way that we provide, our GeoNexus integration platform, and hopefully what it provides your organization. That is using GeoNexus to have a standard way of connecting these systems, a standard way of synchronizing data. And the hope is that through that, what we do is we get all the teams working on the same page, right? Working from the same picture, your field crews, your analysts, your boardroom, everybody has the same data. And our hope is that, that unification is providing consistent connected data across every system. And here's the key, that if we can do that, that ultimately we create this blanket of truth, this layer of truth over the organization, and ultimately provide and reach that goal of creating one trusted organizational view across all of these systems, right? And so my point in that, and as we go forward, is this is a real opportunity. There's opportunity to fix these. Zach talked about replacing existing integrations. He talked about, the mitigation of risk that's there. We're going to talk more about that. But the real opportunity is to create, to truly modernize as you go through, which definitely a heavy lift in terms of this project, but a great opportunity in front of you to modernize and to make the organization better as you do. All right. I did want to talk, I'm going to turn it over to Zach, and we're going to get into the bulk of things here and talking about specific projects. I want to talk a little bit about how we work together, right? Where does integration start in the midst of these projects? Because one question that we get a lot as GeoNexus is, we're doing a UN project, and what parts of it do you do, right? So do you do the data schema design? And so I want to get into that. But before I do, I'm going to offer up our second poll question, if we can hit that, because I want to know where you're at in your project as I talk about our role in these. So if we could launch that second question. The question is, what stage of the UN project are you in today, right? No pun in there meant. What stage of the utility network project are you currently in? And so go ahead and provide your answers to that if you would, and I'll publish the results in just a second as we get some votes in there. But again, as I talk through this slide, I'm hoping to illustrate what Langen would take care of in this project, what other partners of ours take care of in a project like this. And you can see it illustrated here, right? So GeoNexus comes in just the integration portion. We don't handle data schema. Things like requirement, the design of the UN, process design around your workflow, the actual data migration, right? Those are all things, and then the training after the fact, those are all things that Langen would handle, and Zach's going to make that very clear as he goes through. And then the integration portion of things, we typically come in, if you're used to the vernacular of having kind of a prime vendor and a subcontractor. In this illustration, Langen would be the prime and GeoNexus would sub under them. And we would sell you integrations, or we'd give you the integration platform directly to your company, but we would work with Langen on how that fits into the actual project. When's the right time for us to come in and do what we do, right? And so we can fit seamlessly into your UN project to help, fix, upgrade existing integrations as we've talked about. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and publish these results. The good news is this is about what I expected. Quite a few in the planning, not yet started phase. So hopefully we didn't freak you out too much. Hopefully we're going to provide you some good learning here to take with you. Piloting, I would expect that. And then in progress, that's great. And no completed yet. I did expect to see a couple of completed just because that would be ahead of the game. But this makes sense from our perspective. So thank you for those answers. Helpful to see where you're at. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach, and he's going to talk about Langen and how they approach projects.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So at a high level, Langen approaches utility network projects as a structured, phased approach, not a single-step activity. We start with project initiation and discovery, where the focus is on understanding your current environment, your data, your integrations, and what success looks like for your organization. From there, we move into data readiness and planning, which is where we evaluate the quality of your existing data and identify what needs to be addressed before migration. The next phase is data model design and configuration, where we're aligning your business needs with the utility network structure, making sure the model supports how you actually operate. Once that's in place, we move into migration, validation, and deployment, which is where the data gets transitioned into a new system and thoroughly tested. And finally, we focus on training, go live, and sustainment, because long-term success depends on your team being comfortable and confident working in the new environment. The big takeaway here is that successful utility network migrations aren't just data exercises, they're coordinated efforts across people, processes, and technology. And one of the biggest considerations during that process is how you actually keep things running during the transition. So let's talk about that next. one of the most common concerns we hear is how do we make this transition without disrupting operations? And the answer is you don't flip a switch. You run both systems in parallel for a period of time. Typically, that transition window can last anywhere from 6 to 12 months, depending on the complexity of the organization. During that time, there are really three phases. First, you continue running your geometric network as is. Then you move into a phase where both the GN and the UN are running together and staying synchronized. And finally, once everything is validated and ready, you transition fully to utility network and retire the GN. The key to making this work is bidirectional synchronization, so data is flowing between the two systems without gaps. What this means in practice is that your field crews can keep working in a familiar environment, your integrations with systems like OMS and billing stay intact, and you avoid the risk of a big bang cutover. The takeaway is that staying operational during migration is not only possible, it's the right way to do it when it's planned correctly. And to make that more concrete, let's look at what this means for a critical system like an outage management system. In this case, the client was implementing a new outage management system at the same time as their utility network migration. The OMS wasn't built against a legacy geometric network. It had to align with the utility network model that was still evolving. The primary risk was that as the model matured, changes to connectivity, line segmentation, and identifiers could impact how the OMS performed outage tracing and response workflows. We saw issues like incorrect tracing results tied to topology adjustments, mismatched asset IDs from line splitting, and data exchange challenges, especially with GeoJSON and domain value translation. Early testing also revealed disconnected areas when utility network data was published into the OMS. To address this, we took a structured, collaborative approach with both the client and OMS vendor. We established a controlled GeoJSON data exchange workflow with domain mapping for consistency and validated iteratively, continuously running utility network outputs through the OMS rather than waiting until the end. This allowed us to catch and resolve connectivity gaps, switch state issues, and topology inconsistencies early, while carefully managing how segmentation and identifiers evolved. The outcome was a successful parallel implementation where the OMS remained operational throughout the transition and the GIS environment progressed towards full readiness, ultimately improving network accuracy and outage tracing reliability. This highlights how an iterative, well-coordinated integration approach can reduce risk even when systems are being implemented at the same time. So to ground everything we've been discussing, let's look at a couple real-world examples of how clients we've worked with approach utility network implementation while navigating different organizational and data challenges. So this example is a large private entertainment campus in Los Angeles with multiple business units managing utilities across several sites. From a utility network perspective, the goal was to implement an enterprise GIS that could support long-term growth while improving visibility into their utility systems. The challenge was that there were no consistent GIS models in place, and each business unit had different operational workflows. This directly ties back to what we discussed earlier. There was a limited understanding of system integrations, no standardized schema, and a real risk of disconnected data across the organization. Langen's approach was to first build a strong GIS foundation, then strategically implement the utility network where it made the most sense. We developed standardized data models and migrated 3 core utilities into the utility network, while also creating supporting models for other systems. We also implemented automated ETL pipelines and began connecting systems to move toward that one trusted view. The outcome is a centralized, scalable platform that improves data consistency and visibility across the campus. While only 3 utilities are currently in utility network, the system is positioned for expansion, and the client now has a much clearer path for integrations, governance, and long-term operations. So The next and final example is Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority, or GNHWPCA again, where Langen has been a long-term GIS partner supporting their transition to the utility network. The goal is to modernize their existing system and enable more advanced analysis, integration, and field workflows using the ArcGIS utility network. The challenge was that they were operating on a legacy geometric network, which limited their ability to integrate with systems like 811, capital planning, and billing. This ties directly to the earlier points. There were integration constraints, limited ability to support modern workflows, and a need to plan for a complex transition while remaining operational. Langen led a full utility network migration, starting with data readiness and asset package development, and moving into implementation of branch versioning and trace-enabled workflows. We also designed a hybrid architecture to support both enterprise and web access, and coordinated closely with field teams to align on workflows early in the process. The outcome is a fully deployed utility network managing over 35,000 assets with improved data quality, automated processes, and strong QA/QC. Field and office teams now have better connectivity through mobile and web tools, and the organization has a scalable foundation to support future integrations and continued system growth. With that in mind, I'll hand it over to Josh to walk through the GeoNexus approach to making those integrations work.
Excellent. Thanks, Zach. We did have a question come in. Nick posed a question about running the GN and the UN at the same time, and what you do as things are drawn and connected differently between the systems. I want to make sure there's some complexity in here, Nick. The answer really depends. I hate to give that answer, but what I'll do just to make sure that I have your question clearly is I'll follow up with you specifically afterwards, and we'll reach out to you directly and we can get that answered for you, because I think some of it depends on kind of your use case and some of the specifics of your system. And so if I can get a little bit more detail there, I'll work to provide you an answer offline if that's good. But thank you for sharing the question. And just as a reminder, feel free to share those questions. We're moving quickly to our Q&A section here, and we'll be able to answer those. So I showed you this slide once. I'm going to talk about this integration piece of things in case you were mesmerized by the poll that was there. Again, this is just a layout of kind of what a standard UN project looks like. And where integration fits in that and kind of who handles what. I'm going to talk about really our approach and how we approach this kind of GN-UN piece that Zach was talking about a little bit. All right, so to get into it, this is probably, if you're one of those that answered the poll question that you're just getting started, your current state looks something like this, where you have integrations, and I'm talking specifically about integrations and synchronization of data here. You have at a minimum, you probably have asset management hooked up to your GN at this point. You might have some mobile or web applications that are built on top of Esri that are running at this point. If you're a little bit more advanced in terms of how your integrations are working, perhaps you're connected to other applications, whether they're homegrown or other commercial applications, and maybe your customer information system, right? And this is typically the way the world works when we start. Again, GIS to asset management is kind of the baseline, with some mobile applications, I would say, is kind of the standard and popular view of a system setup or a tech stack, right? And really where we go from there is, the first piece of things is connecting the GN and the UN, right? And so the why behind the GN and the UN connection might be obvious, might not, right? But the big piece is, as Zach said, it's not a light switch. We don't, this project doesn't happen overnight. For some of our customers, it's 2 to 3 years that it's taking them to move from the GN to the UN. So keeping that data synchronized, whether you have a part of a team that's still working in the GN and a part of the team that's working in the UN, keeping the data synchronized is important. A typical use case that we hear is that there are legacy applications that are out there, and these things are moving forward, so it's not as much the case as it used to be, but legacy applications that were built on top of Esri, using the GN that don't yet support the UN, and they're continuing to use those applications, whether they're field apps or whatnot. And so supporting that, keeping the GN with the same data is important. And so all of these evolved into the reason that this use case is something that's being leveraged through the platform, the GIP platform, with the understanding that we're basically using that Esri connector that we talked about at the top to build an Esri to Esri integration there. And then, as you would expect, we move to the next phase of things, right? And you can see this is labeled as phases 2 to infinity. It's really not, but you get the point, right? That, we're moving in phases to, usually it's to set up the utility network to the asset management system. Oftentimes, one of the things that we're seeing is that this is coinciding with an upgrade. There's some major upgrades happening from an asset management perspective. A lot of UN projects with MAS 9 mixed in there, with the move to MAS 9 mixed in. S4HANA being another one, seeing organizations that are upgrading to that as well at the same time. And then really, again, to my point earlier, taking the opportunity to, it's kind of like if we're in there and if we've opened up the circuit board, if we're looking at all the wires, why don't we start connecting the wires to some of these other use cases that'll really move the business forward, right? Connecting into customer information systems, moving into build integrations between GIS and OMS, ADMS, and then upgrading with, perhaps there are upgrades in mobile and web applications that they're using for other operations, but taking the opportunity to upgrade those. Yes, in some cases, lengthening the time and increasing the cost of the project, but really working, we see this a lot, really working to do full modernization as they go in and decide to get into this UN project or this other upgrade projects for other systems that are there. And the way that we approach this, as I go through this is kind of, 3-step. We found success in kind of building a POC. That was one of the questions that we had up there earlier. That was specific to the UN. But kind of taking that pilot phase approach, building out some of the workflow, testing some of that workflow, validating some of that workflow, then building the GNUN synchronization, getting that data moving, and then ultimately moving that to production, right? Is kind of the way that we flow through that in terms of an organization. And then why, right? I always like to give the why behind, why does it make sense to do this? Why are the organizations we're working with doing this? Right. The first big piece is validation, right? You want to know that these designs that you're setting up are working, that the data is going to flow properly, and test it. I think one of the bullets that was in one of my earlier slides is, this often gets tested in a lower environment, right? GeoNexus is typically set up in kind of a dev and then a test and then a prod. Moving slowly to production and ultimately making sure they're getting it all right before they move into production for obvious reasons, because you don't want to have to go back and clean up all that data, as we've already established in here, is something that you're already faced with. We don't want to double the problem there. This is the biggest benefit, right? Configuration over custom development. I talked about brittle point-to-point integrations earlier. Our real goal is to provide you with out-of-the-box tools so that you're not having to manage those, right? One of the ways that I've heard it talked about is the question of, well, who's going to manage this integration once the person that set it up walks out of the building? One of the things that we talk about a lot is the fact that there are point-to-point integrations that are out there now where there's one person in the organization that really has the IP around these integrations. And when they retire, the knowledge around the integrations retires with them. And, it's a real thing that we hear from our customers as the reason they're coming to us. And then ultimately, and this is probably wrapped in everything I'm saying here, is our goal is to reduce the risk for your organization, right? To give you a standard way of managing these, to give you out-of-the-box tools so multiple people, can do things, to reduce the timeline of your project, to reduce the cost of your project, but ultimately to reduce the risk of managing your integrations, setting up your integrations over time. Okay. All right. And then with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Zach. He's going to wrap us up with some practical items to bring with you. Again, if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. To wrap everything up, this slide outlines 5 practical steps you can take right now to reduce risk and set your utility network implementation up for success. First, audit your current integrations. Take the time to map out every system that touches your GIS, whether that's asset management, billing, work order systems, or SCADA. Understanding those dependencies early helps you avoid surprises and identify what needs to change as you move to the utility network. Second, don't wait for a perfect utility network schema. The data model will continue to evolve, but integration planning, system architecture, and governance decisions take time. Starting those conversations early puts you in a much better position later on. Third, plan for parallel operation. Most organizations will need to run their geometric network and utility network side by side for a period of time. That overlap is critical for maintaining operations while you transition workflows and train users. Fourth, bring your field operations team in early. They're the ones using the system every day, so their input is essential to designing practical editing workflows, data collection processes, and mobile tools that actually work in the field. And finally, start building your one trusted view of data now. The utility network is an opportunity to better connect systems like OMS, billing, and asset management and move toward a more unified, reliable source of truth across the organization. So now I'll hand it back to Josh and we'll do any questions that we may have.
Awesome. I do have one additional question, and Zach, I'll let you think about this. Maybe I'll answer this one first and let you think about it. So just looking back across some of the UN projects that have been done, from your point of view, what tends to make them smoother? I'm sure that it's been talked about in here somewhere, but what tends to make the migration smoother versus ones that have been more disruptive? Give you a second to think about that. I think, from my perspective with that question, we've talked about integration. We're obviously, because we're talking about the UN project, we're talking about something that is starting with the GIS team. I can tell you across all integration projects, and this stands with the UN projects as well, and probably more specifically because it's a UN project and it's starting with the GIS team, get the other teams involved, right? And that probably goes without saying, but you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many times we go into an integration specific discussion, whether it's a UN project or not, and we get to the asset management side of things and we start asking questions about, say, Maximo. And it's like, well, we'll have to go find somebody on the Maximo side. I think this is the right person to talk to. And, and it's kind of bringing them in after the fact and after some of the discussion has been made. And so there's a lot of catch up, right? Which definitely, draws the timeline out. But also it's, the ones that I've seen work really well is when a team comes to us and it's multiple players from different teams, right? There's somebody from asset management that's in there. There's somebody from GIS, typically somebody from IT, right? And so when we have all of those players at the table to begin with, it definitely makes the project go a lot smoother. And so with that, Zach, do you want me to repeat the question for you or you got it?
No, I got it.
Right,
so from my perspective, some of the things that make it go, smoother from the get-go all the way through, one of the big ones that jumps out for me is buy-in. As a consultant for utility network projects, I'm going to have a lot of questions, not in a negative context, but in a informative context where we have questions to make the utility network better for you and your use case. So having that buy-in from different people, whether it be the field workers to the GIS admins to leaders in your organization, right? Having those answers, truly sitting down and thinking about your fields, your business processes, and everything in between, makes the whole process go smoother and eliminates any back and forth when it's too late or the ball is too far down the hill.
Awesome. Great answer and great one to close with. Just one other piece. If you want to reach out to either myself or Zach, please do so. You can see our email addresses here. Look for us at the Esri UC if you're going there. And then we hope that tomorrow, I know what Zach will be doing. We have tomorrow, you'll all be rooting for the U.S. Unless we have some of our Canadian friends on here, we get it. But enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks a lot for taking the time. And Zach, thank you for taking the time out of your day to help me
Yeah, of
put this
course.
together and for providing some great information here. Really appreciate it.
Always happy.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, everyone.